Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and my 10th entry in the On Wax review series. Yes, we've had that many, but I suppose it's not as much as you probably like, since I don't review every album that comes out. But I did want to talk about, excuse me, I did want to talk about the latest album from Kacey Musgraves, the country singer-songwriter extraordinaire. This is her 6th studio album, and I think if you guys saw my top 10 female artists of all time video, she was on the list, and so you know that I think very, very highly of Kacey Musgraves, especially her earlier body of work from the early to mid 2010s. I think she really proved herself to be one of the most talented songwriters of her generation, and certainly within the realm of country music, really bringing it back to its roots in a way that's very digestible, and in a way that isn't purely soulless, and it's actually about something, right? And so I've enjoyed all of her albums so far, even her last album, Star-Crossed, which I know quite a few people were mixed on. I thought it was quite good. I think it had some brilliant moments on it, and some moments that weren't quite up to snuff with some of her absolute best material. So, when I heard that she was coming out with a new album, I was obviously all in. Had a very provocative back cover, you could say, quite literally. And so that definitely got me interested. And the album itself, of course, I mean, Kacey Musgraves comes out with something, I'm going to listen to it. And what I can tell you about this album is it's good. I can say that at the very least because, yet again, I don't think she ever has made any record that has been less than good and enjoyable. And I think this is the same for Deeper Well. As opposed to Star-Crossed, though, I think this is where the conversation gets a little interesting, because I know the reception to this one is a bit lukewarm. Definitely skews a bit more positive than Star-Crossed. But to me, I might like Star-Crossed a little bit more, just because even though it has lower lows that this album doesn't quite have, I think the emotional heights and the wit and the brilliance in the songwriting is there in a way that perhaps it isn't fully on this album. And we'll get into that, because this certainly does harken back more to her country roots than her pop roots, but it does have a very strong pop sensibility in regards to melody and tone and approach, which in some ways I appreciate. In some ways that's a bit of a double-edged sword, you could say. More on that later. But of course you start off this album with Cardinal, which offers a very, very nice poppy hook that you can sink your teeth into, I suppose. And it's she's talking about how she's kind of lost this friend, and she sees a cardinal and almost sees that as a reincarnation, and heaven sending her a sign just when she is thinking about this person. And it's a nice song, It isn't one of her most exceptional songs lyrically, but it still has a nice tune, of course, and it does get the message across. And I think, of course, the title track, Deeper Well, is one of the best songs on this album. Of course, one of the lead singles off this record, and it's not hard to see why. I also think that Kacey Musgraves must have had a crazy high tolerance. She's hitting a gravity bong when she gets up in the morning. No. That's got to be insane. But even so, I do love how the song is kind of her talking about all the negative people in her life, or that have been in her life, and how she's kind of looking forward at the future and trying to cut out all these habits that perhaps have held her back a bit, or all the negativity that she needs to cut out of her life. Yet again, another great hook, but I think this one stands out a bit more lyrically. Still, it doesn't have the same tact or wit that some of her earlier stuff did, but it still plays into that whole relatability of Kacey Musgraves as an artist that we've all come to expect at this point, and I do absolutely love the song. And another thing I must mention about this album is how clean the transitions are between the tracks, for the most part. it really does have a flow to it in the way like something the White Album would. And of course, I'm not putting it on the same level as the White Album, mind you, but it definitely gave me that sort of similar feeling. And I really appreciate when albums seamlessly flow from track to track. As I said, it doesn't happen on every track, but it certainly does between the last song and Too Good to Be True, which of course was the second pre-release single off of this album, and another one of my favorite songs. I definitely love this song as well. Yet again, a very relatable track at that, kind of her talking about creating this new relationship with someone. And of course, you know how it is when you're getting to know someone, there's so much chemistry and so much enjoyment and just so much goodwill to be shared all around. Nothing has been soured yet, of course. And I love how the song kind of taps into that, you know, like, please don't tell me this is too good to be true, because, you know, she's obviously searching for something very real. And I think that is something we all, you know, perhaps look for in our own lives. And I feel like most people have experienced that at that point in their lives, of course. So, yeah, definitely a song I personally related to, and definitely one of the highlights on the album, like I said. And then we get Moving Out, not the Billy Joel song, of course, not Anthony's song. And this track I really did enjoy a lot. I wouldn't quite say I loved it, but I did like the message of it. It seemed more of like a nostalgic sort of look back at this house, maybe that she grew up in with her family, and her kind of talking about the bittersweet emotions that are kind of associated with that home, and, you know, the excitement of eventually leaving it, but also the sadness that's going to be there for leaving it behind, because, you know, there's so much memories that have taken place in this one particular spot that, of course, you're going to be emotionally attached to it in a way, you know. And of course, yet another song, if you've moved at all, you know how it is. She could be talking about maybe a house she shared with a former lover, but I'm inclined to believe the former. If just reading by the lyrics beat by beat, it seems like it's more of a familial thing than that. And I definitely think most people growing up have probably been in a situation where they have to move from house to house. And yeah, I really enjoyed this track. Yet again, like, the lyrics are very straightforward and to the point. Yet again, not as rounded or pointed as maybe some of her earlier stuff, but it's still a good song. And, you know, the fact I talk about it for like a minute, I should say that it is pretty good. And then the next track, Give or Take Her, is another favorite of mine off this track list, and I think one of the more poignant songs lyrically. Of course, she's talking about this lover she's with and wanting to take everything that he can give to her. And there's one line in particular that really stood out to me where she says, "Wrap me in your arms like I'm made of glass." That really feels like a very classic type of Kacey Musgraves touch that you get in her songwriting. And yeah, you really feel like her expressing that she wants this guy to take her as well for everything that she can dish out on him, no matter how sharp or painful that might be, you know, going through all the hard times to create something better and you know, create a whole that perhaps they couldn't just have on their own. So I really thought that this track was definitely a standout, certainly from a lyrical standpoint, and definitely one of my favorites on the album. And once you get to the middle of the album with the next song, Sway, and a few others, I think that's where my problems become very apparent with this record, where it kind of sounds a bit middling, in the sense that, you know, none of the songs are bad or anything like that. I mean, I just talked about how a few of them I really love, but I just think that they sound very much the same, and there isn't anything lyrically sort of gripping me in a way that a lot of her other stuff has. And I think, yet again, it does feel very repetitive in a way that maybe some of her other records did not, as well as some of the arrangement. Like Dinner with Friends, this is an interesting case because I do love the arrangement of it, and I love the chord progression. It's quite sublime in a lot of ways. But you get some very questionable production choices, more pop-influenced and more synth-based. And it's not because of the usage of synths, obviously, but the way it's utilized, the way she double backs her voice, I'm pretty sure it's like an octave apart or something from when she's singing on the chorus. It really does not sound that great. And I think, yet again, even though this is certainly more country than her previous album, you still get certain glimmers of that pop touch. And I don't think it entirely works from a production standpoint. And I think that song, quite frankly, falls apart a bit because of those set production choices, where it really could have been one of the highlights on the album, and yet it gets kind of buried underneath all this other stuff going on. In songs like Heart of the Woods and Jade Green, they kind of fall, maybe not in the sense where the production's particularly questionable, but they just kind of sound samey to me, and I don't really care as much, and I'm not as absorbed into the music overall. And I think part of that also does have to do with how simplistic some of the lyrics are, which is something that at this point I would expect more of Kacey Musgraves. Yet again, she's expressing herself, like, that's fine if that's how she feels, but I guess for me personally, I've come to expect a bit more in what she's saying and in the depth there. But I feel like a lot of these songs are fairly surface level, which is why this album feels very inconsistent to me compared to a lot of her other earlier works. And I know I don't mean to beat a dead horse or anything, but that really is what I was hoping we might get away from a bit, and in some ways we did, in some ways we're still at the same spot. So yeah, maybe not the high watermark of her career or anything from a songwriting standpoint, but luckily that is followed up with what I believe is very much in the vein of a classic Kacey Musgraves song, and easily my favorite song on the album, which is The Architect, which is this beautiful contemplation and exploration where she's essentially asking the architect, perhaps praying to God, asking about the meaning of life and all the coincidences and everything that happens, either positive or tragic. Like, is this all something that is premeditated or shaped, or can I sort of go about my life in a constructive way and be able to build off my own previous experiences? And I feel like that type of writing is something that really defines Kacey Musgraves as an artist, especially one lyric in the song that I have to share because it might be my favorite lyric on the entire album, which is, "One day you're on top of a mountain so high that you'll never come down, then the wind at your back carries ember and ash and burns your whole house to the ground." I mean, if that doesn't sum up the unpredictability of life, when you're at your absolute highest and then just brought down to your lowest of lows. I love the fact that that question is pondered in the song in such a tactful sort of way. And I think the arrangement itself feels like something that could have been off of either Golden Hour or even same trailer, different park. It really does fit within that pantheon. And it's very interesting because that's the only song on the album which she collaborated with her songwriters early on in her career. And I think their sensibilities as writers and in collaboration with her really is maybe the strongest element of that song, and really proves why it's probably the best song on the record. If I had to reckon, their involvement is certainly very noticeable once you look at the track listing. But yet again, I absolutely love this song, and I'm really, really glad it's on this record more than anything. And then we get to the next song, which is Lonely Millionaire, which I feel is a pretty surface level exploration of this type of idea. It was something that I feel like she probably really relates to, hence why she wrote it. But yet again, it's like we've seen this idea explored in many ways in the past. Like, this is nothing new, and I don't think she really is saying anything that brings anything new to the table. I wish it was something more in the vein of something like Taylor Swift's The Last American Dynasty. I think that would be really, really interesting. And of course, I'm not trying to conflate the two as the same thing, but I think that's a really interesting story about, someone who Taylor Swift certainly relates to, being a figure in the public eye, certainly a woman in the public eye, and coming up with a very constructive way to talk about it and relate it back to modern day. This is nothing that I think is going to particularly stand out. And yet again, another reason it kind of brings this album down for me a bit. And yet again, Heaven is another nice ballad, but compared to everything else on this album, it's quite indistinguishable. And yet again, hate that is the case, but yet again, it's not like a bad song or anything. I can't really say that there are many bad songs on this record at all, except very questionable moments here or there. Which brings us to Anime Eyes, which on paper, her writing a song about anime, it could have been a lot worse, I definitely think. And for a good portion of the song, I really loved it. And I really love some of the very tasteful references to anime, where she says, we'll paint Miyazaki's skies. What a great ode to one of the greatest masters of cinema, and certainly the greatest master in the anime realm. And then she turns into an anime character halfway through the song, and I'm like, what is this? And it completely derails all momentum and goodwill that it previously had. I mean, it doesn't completely tank the song, but the last half of the song I'm really not a fan of, if I'm being honest with you, which is really disappointing, and to my point about this album being disjointed, because it has so many moments like that are really great, that are just brought down by a questionable decision in the writing or the production. And I certainly feel that way about this song. And yeah, in the last song as well. I mean, I don't really have much to say about it, so I won't. I think, you know, not to go on too much, because I think you get the idea of how I feel about this album. And yet again, she hasn't missed, really, at least not in the sense where she's making anything particularly mediocre overall, because I still would say that Deeper Well is quite a good album. It's just not to that level of what she's done before. And I really hope next time out she really creates something that gets back to the brilliant songwriting that was present on her albums earlier in her career, which made her take off and get shot to superstardom, because I think she's one of the most interesting lyricists and voices in modern music, especially in modern country. It's not even a contest. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to her next album, whenever that may be, a couple years from now, 3 years from now, I don't know. But, you know, Kacey Musgraves is always an artist I'm going to be interested in what she does. Like I've said previously, in Deeper Well, yeah, it has a lot of great moments, has quite a few great songs, but kind of comes out to middling results in some areas. So, overall, I'm going to give Deeper Well a very light 7 out of 10 if I had to rate this record, which I always do. And yeah, it's a good album. I think it's definitely worth the listen, especially if you're a Kacey Musgraves fan. Gotta be in the know with what's going on. And yeah, I wish her all the best of luck with this album and this tour. Maybe I'll get to see her. I'd love to see Kacey in concert one day. I love that woman, and I love her artistry nonetheless. And yeah, so let me know what you guys thought about Deeper Well down in the comments below. Do you agree with what I'm saying with this album? Did you like it less than I did? Did you love it? I still would love to hear why that is. And of course, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. Hopefully there will be more album reviews. I can't say, you know, what the next one's going to be. And I do apologize for my tardiness on this review. I know I said I'd get it up within a week, but, you know, I've been working pretty consistently and doing a lot of things. So I haven't really gotten the time to carve out. And thankfully, I finally got a chance to sit down and talk about this record with you guys. And speaking of things I've been doing, things I've been seeing, there's a couple of very great reviews that I want to bring to you of great movies, and that's Problemista and Hundreds of Beavers, which I cannot wait to talk about. And yeah, definitely going to want to hear my thoughts on that if you are interested in the movies on this channel, because as you know, I'm reviewing movies all the time. And yeah, and of course, stay on the lookout this week for the top 50 albums of the 50s, which is going to be premiering on Johnny Radio. Definitely check out John's channel. I'll be sure to drop a link down in the description, so if you haven't checked out Johnny Radio yet, you can. You're certainly not going to want to miss this countdown as we run through one of the most classic and essential decades for music to ever exist. Definitely become one of my favorites in the past few months and weeks here. Going to be talking about a lot of great records, and we would love for you to join that. But yeah, until next time, guys, you have yourselves a good one, and keep listening to those albums. I'll definitely talk to you soon.